We're too woke, insisting that people use the term Latinx.
Too far to the left on transgender rights.
You have to say they. No, you have to do this.
Stop with the virtue signaling.
Step away from woke. Focus less on who is woke and more on who is broke.
Social justice issues take a back seat when your son is in the basement vaping and playing video games and can't find a job.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. We got to talk about a Democrat Party civil war, which is my favorite topic. But let's be honest. There's a civil war that is going to happen in both parties. The Republican Party currently is probably going to have a civil war between the establishment Republicans and the Trump administration. But let's focus on the Democrats for right now. Okay, we're going to be focusing on both on this channel. But in this video, the Democrats are battling with themselves over whether or not the Democrat Party is too woke, okay? And you have some Democrat strategists, like, for example, James Carville and others, telling the truth, okay? They're going on these networks and saying, you know what? The Democrats are way too woke, and that is part of the reason why we lost. Take a look.
And was woke overdone?
Right. Well, I'll tell you exactly what I make of it. I was in the Sunday New York Times that a lot of people read, that I'm sure you read, in Maureen Dowd's column. I said, I'll give Harris credit. She didn't use any of the woke language, but this is like trying to wash clothes that's got smoke all over them. You can't get the stench out. And you could ask Senators Manchin, Senator Casey, Senator Brown, Senator Tessa, if they don't think that defund the police had an adverse effect on attitudes toward the Democratic Party. My God, you're right. It was so stupid, no one wanted to bring it up, 3 years later, but the residue of it just stuck with us. And you got to read exactly what was said, exactly what I said. And it's going to take more than one cycle to get this stench off of the Democratic Party. And it's a stench of the highest order, let me tell you.
I'm going to ask you about the stench in a moment, but I first want to say, because you brought up Maureen Dowd, and there is also an idea that America is still not ready for a female president. But last spring you said, a suspicion of mine is that there are too many preachy females dominating the culture of the Democratic Party. Do you stand by that, females?
Would you look at our male vote? Would somebody just take a look at how we did with males and how we did with non-white males and tell me that the Democrats don't have a messaging problem, that their message comes across as too feminine? I mean, of course I was right when I said that. I don't think there's not a person in the world I've talked to that doubts that I'm right now.
Okay, James.
I say provocative things to get a provocative reaction. But are somebody going to really tell me we don't have a problem with male voters?
Yeah. So although James Carville was wrong when it came to his prediction that Kamala Harris would win, he is right about the party being too woke and listening to too many preachy females. He's 100% right about that because, one, the Democrat Party is too woke, and two, on top of that, look at what the Democrats ran on. They ran a campaign that was entirely focused on women. You already had a woman at the top who obviously was very incompetent, right? And incompetent women. And then you had a soft, emotional man as the VP. And all they talked about was abortion. That's it. I mean, that is essentially what her whole thing was, abortion. Now, for a man, okay, at least most men with normal testosterone levels, abortion is not really that big of an issue in the sense that it's not going to be the deciding issue, right? You're going to put other issues like, for example, the economy and the border over that issue. And that is why Democrats lost heavily with men, is because they completely ignored men. And the reason why is because preachy females don't give a damn about what men think, right? They believe that abortion is right, even though it's not, okay? And on top of that, these progressive women, right? These preachy females, aka progressive women, these progressive women not only are the reason why Kamala Harris ran only basically on abortion and essentially alienated men because they thought that they didn't need men, okay, because they thought that they were going to make 2022 happen again. Turns out they were wrong about that. But I guarantee you these same women are the same people that were responsible for Kamala Harris making the mistake of not doing the Joe Rogan podcast. Because apparently one of the reasons why she didn't want to do the podcast is because of potential progressive backlash from her going on his show. Take a look.
They had, I don't know how many conversations with my folks.
Right.
But multiple conversations, giving different dates, different times, different this, different that. And we knew that she was going to be in Texas. So I said, open invitation. I think they had requirements on things that she didn't want to talk about. She didn't want to talk about marijuana legalization, which I thought was hilarious.
Why?
Like, that's so, because of her prosecuting record. And, you know, she put a lot of people in jail for weed.
You had that, and you had this from one of the spokesmen. There was a backlash with some of our progressive staff that didn't want her to be on it and how there would be backlash. I guess there's truth in there somewhere, gentlemen. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's malpractice, right? You're worried about your staff's feelings and not, you know, getting in front of tens of millions of voters, more than watch the evening news even. And look, Rogan is a symptom of a larger cause, right? I don't think doing Rogan would suddenly win her the election, but it spoke to a mindset of playing it safe, of keeping her from a lot of interviews for most of the campaign, of not taking risks, of not saying, hey, let's figure out 3 things where we can separate ourselves from the historically unpopular president in our party, of, hey, let's cater to this interest identity group and that interest identity group instead of trying to win voters and build the broadest tent possible. Look, Rogan in itself didn't lose the election, but it was a mindset that informed all of that did.
My feeling, Philippe, is that
Yeah, so race hustlers like Charlemagne the Devil argue that going on Joe Rogan was not a big deal, right? In fact, he tried to talk about how that is less of a big deal than calling Trump a fascist, okay, and focusing on identity politics, which is the only thing that these race hustlers have. And that's why a lot of these race hustlers, like, for example, Roland Martin, they're upset with Democrats like James Carville and others coming out and basically denouncing identity politics and wokeness. Take a look.
Well, you can always count on white Democrats to start complaining and, oh my God, this is what happened and why we lost, and it's defund the police, it's wokeism, it's identity politics, it's all of that stuff, even though none of that stuff Vice President Kamala Harris actually talked about. It's just whining and complaining. Here's James Carville just really upset, talking about, I mean, we told y'all this identity crap, it's awful. Listen to this.
Get your head around that. In all of the Washington-based Democrats farting around, going to wine and cheese parties and talking about how misogynistic race comes, get your ass out of Washington and go work on a 2026 campaign and do penance to make up for your goddamn arrogance and stupidity. Well, we're going to say we told you so. We told you this identity shit was disaster. We told you to get out in front of public safety issues. You didn't. We told you to have an open process and demonstrate the magnificent and staggering and deep talent that exists in the modern Democratic Party. You didn't. We told you to differentiate yourself from Biden. You didn't. I hate to be some fucking know-it-all, but all of these things are part of the record.
But the thing that trips me out is all of a sudden they're blaming identity politics. And here's the thing, Cliff, they never seem to admit that whiteness is identity politics. Maleness, white maleness is identity politics. It seems that, if it's black or women or Latino or gay, that's the only identity politics that exists. Here is Donald Trump touting identity politics today.
Yes. And getting their money's worth. Furthermore, I will direct the Department of Justice to pursue federal civil rights cases against schools that continue to engage in racial discrimination.
Donald Trump is saying, white people, I'm coming to you with reparations. The Republicans talk to these people about culture, about God, gays, and guns. Republicans ran $135 million worth of ads about Vice President Kamala Harris and transgender surgeries for illegal immigrants in prison. Even though the policy came together under Donald Trump, he was in the White Office. He was in the Oval Office. I call it the White Office because historically has been the White Office. But this is the reality. So I'm just trying to understand what is the conversation that Democrats can have with all of these red states that continue to be broke, to be poor, to be illiterate, and have the worst health outcome.
Yeah, so I think one of the first things that the Democrats need to do if they want to reform their party is to not only abandon wokeness, but to abandon the race hustlers, because a vast majority of the wokeness is coming from the race hustlers, okay? Like, just imagine how delusional you have to be to come out and say with a straight face that Kamala Harris did not run on identity politics, just because Kamala Harris herself did not really lean into it like that, but all of her surrogates, all of her mouthpieces did. Like, for example, Kamala Harris, not Trump, but Kamala Harris was the candidate having whole Zoom calls that were segregated based off race and sex and sexuality and whether or not you like your genitalia. Okay, Kamala Harris was doing that. Okay, Kamala Harris had surrogates going into the media saying, yeah, you have to vote for her because she's a black woman. Okay, explicitly talking about how her being a woman and being black is so important. Now, it's also hilarious how Roland Martin claims that Republicans run on white identity politics when it's not actually socially acceptable to run on white identity politics. Anybody that runs overtly on white identity politics, they're banned from the media, right? If you come out here and you start talking about doing what's best for the white man and what about the white man's issues and the issues facing white people in this country, if you start talking about that, you will be banned. Like, it's actually not allowed, right? That's not a thing, okay? It might be a thing on the internet, right? But it's not a thing in mainstream media politics. It's not. Okay, nobody can actually do that and get away with it in 2024. So what he's talking about is not even possible. And the reason why you know this is because his example of Trump running on whiteness is Trump saying, yeah, I want to ban racial discrimination in higher education. Banning racial discrimination in higher education is running on white identity politics. Again, these people they're not as smart as they think they are. They're really not. Okay, they're grasping for straws. This is what you do when you have nothing, right? That is what you call an ass pull. Okay, that's a reach. Okay, that's when you dig so deep you say, some bullshit, right? That's what Roland Martin just did.
You got to jump in his ass. You got to jump in his ass. Jump in his ass. His ass. You got to push back immediately. Jump in his ass.
That's what he just did. I'm so serious, right? I'm so serious. And then the other thing that these people do that really gets me is when Republicans say, hey, we're against identity politics. We're against wokeness. We're against discrimination. We're against these policies that Democrats are advocating for based off identity. They try to say that is Republicans running on identity politics. Like, for example, they try to claim that Republicans ran on trans issues by basically calling out Democrats and some of their far left positions when it comes to the trans issue.
So speaking of policy, your campaign flooded the airwaves in the battleground states and on national cable, even on networks and streaming during NFL games with ads specifically focused on a trans issue. I want you to listen to some of it, and we'll talk on the other side.
Even the liberal media was shocked Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners and illegal aliens.
Every transgender inmate would have access.
Kamala's for they, them. President Trump is for you.
The transgender community in the U.S. is very, very small. It got really outsized attention. There are a lot of people who say that your campaign demonized the trans community as a way to present a wedge issue for perhaps men of color, suburban parents. Why do you think, and I know you believe that those ads worked, why do you think they worked?
Well, first of all, we didn't demonize the transgender community. In fact, This really isn't even about transgender issues. This ad is really about misplaced priorities. At the end of the day, it is a small minority of the country that thinks taxpayer dollars should be spent on that sort of thing. And when you have a majority of the country who is saying very clearly that they don't believe the government is working for them, they're worse off than they were 4 years ago, the country is in the wrong track, and then to see a presidential candidate who is saying she's going to move this agenda forward and that's how taxpayer dollars should be spent, it just doesn't comport with them. They don't think the government is working for them. People want the government to be doing what their priorities are. And frankly, spending taxpayer dollars to give transgender surgery to prisoners is just not a priority of the American people. And that's why the ad was effective. It's about misplaced priorities on behalf of a leader.
So it was using the top issues that are most important to voters, the economy and immigration, and presenting it through an ad that was very memorable. Were you surprised that the Harris campaign didn't respond in kind?
Not particularly, because at the end of the day, it was her words right there very clearly. She was on camera owning that position. And you know, the ad did something else too, which is really important. It positioned her as the ideologically far-left liberal that she is and always was. We saw when she first came into the race, there was this whole rush to try to erase the history of Kamala Harris, who was rated literally the most liberal senator in the U.S. Senate in 2019. And by the way, that was taken off the internet. We know that many outlets came out and said she was never the border czar. And then ultimately, I wouldn't be surprised if she voted for Donald Trump, because she had anonymous aides go out and leak that she was actually supporting his positions now, whether on the economy or the border or otherwise. So she really couldn't run from her words on that one when she was on many other issues.
Boom. I couldn't have said it better myself, right? That ad was not a demonization of trans people. It was more about the fact that Democrats are worried about the wrong issues, right? They're worried about issues that don't really matter to the American people that much, okay? They're worried about them, and not you, okay? That is the whole point of the ad, and that ad was genius. That's not Republicans running on the trans issue, though, right? Like that's the way that Roland Martin is trying to frame that ad, when that's not what the ad was really about, okay? The ad was about the fact that, again, Democrats are spending taxpayer money on things that the American people don't agree with, first and foremost. And then also on top of that, they're not prioritizing the things that the American people want the Democrat Party to be prioritizing, right? They're prioritizing social issues over economic issues, right? And that's what it is about, okay? And it was a highly effective ad, but there was nothing anti-trans about it, okay? And again, Democrats basically coming out and saying, well, Kamala didn't run on identity politics. Again, that's not enough for Democrats to run away from it. As James Carville stated, he said, well, yeah, she still has that stench because first and foremost, again, you know, she is a representation of DEI, right? In the sense that she got picked to be the Democrat Party nominee. She didn't really earn it. She didn't earn a vote. Joe Biden said he picked her to be VP just because she is a black woman, right? So again, she's a representation of DEI. She's a representation of the woke agenda. And just because she's not directly talking about identity politics doesn't change the fact that, again, all of her surrogates and most of the party, all they do is talk about identity politics, right? Again, look at people like Roland Martin. His whole show is identity politics. And right, he's upset and he's mad because Democrats are saying, hey, we should stop focusing on identity politics, right? Let's stop focusing on this. He's upset because that's a threat to his money, right? That's his whole career. That's his whole thing. Without identity politics in the Democrat Party, let's say they stop running on the whole black thing, right? If they stop with the whole black stuff, what is his role? What is he going to do, right? Again, that's a threat to his income. So I understand why he's upset. I understand why there are people who believe that Democrats should double and triple down on identity politics. But let's be real. Republicans running against identity politics is not Republicans running on identity politics, right? That's not the same thing. When Republicans say, hey, we're against, you know, the far left agenda, when it comes to some of these social issues, that's not Republicans running on identity politics. That's Republicans running against identity politics, because Republicans wouldn't be running against it had Democrats not made it an issue in the first place. If they were pro all of these woke policies that the American people disagree with, then Republicans wouldn't have to be against it, right? There wouldn't be any opposition, okay? Republicans aren't going to just put out an ad like that if Democrats didn't give Republicans the ammunition to put out that type of ad, right? It's really that simple. It's really that simple. So again, hey, I personally think that the race hustlers, if the Democrats really want to change, they got to go. You have to distance yourself from these race hustlers, because as long as you're in bed with these race hustlers who have a financial incentive to continue to push far left woke identity politics, you're not going to change. Your party's not going to change. Nothing's going to change, because they are going to demand that you appeal to them. And as long as the Democrats bend over backwards trying to appeal to these niche groups of people that are out of touch with the average American, they're going to have this problem, right? They're going to have this issue. So again, interesting developments in the Democrat Party, full-blown civil war. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.